My name's Abigail Forman. I am a former state lawmaker from Minnesota. I now live in North Carolina, but I have the privilege of working with Liberty Council Action and delighted to share here today among so many talented people. Let me just share my screen here. Let's see, share screen. There we go. Basically,
I actually,
we need to back
the
up a little
screen
bit.
is not
I
shared
had
quite yet.
wanted
Oh, here it
to.
comes. Sorry. Now
Okay,
we've got,
good.
okay,
Good.
perfect. Carry on.
No worries. Okay, good. I was praying about what to share and just felt the Lord drop into my heart 3 different scriptures that are going to form the foundation of my tips for meeting with your state lawmaker. 1 Timothy 2 talks about praying for all those in leadership. That needs to undergird everything we do. We also want to make sure we're praying for wisdom because and Laurel actually touched on this really well. Your strategy for speaking to lawmakers is going to vary for every lawmaker. And so you ask the Lord for wisdom. Proverbs 21:22 talks about pulling down strongholds. And we want to pull down the strongholds that are in our government that need pulling down. And we do that by asking the Lord for wisdom. And then perseverance. It is incredibly challenging to fight for an issue and want to see effective change. Even on the abortion issue, we've seen some great advancements, but there's still a long way to go. And so just praying for that perseverance is key. But within that, we know that our faith can move mountains. And so I want to also just emphasize the fact that prayer needs to be partnered with action. And I think that's why everybody's here. The idea of grassroots activism being key. Remember, a pastor of mine actually once said he was praying and praying in his prayer closet for God to open the eyes of the blind. And finally, one day the Lord said to him, well, it would really help me to answer that prayer if you'd go pray for somebody who's blind to have their sight restored. So we want to just make sure that we're partnering our prayers with some action. In this case, if you feel the Lord calling you to go talk to your state lawmaker, like at least 50%, you're like, I think the Lord is saying this, I would just encourage you to go do it. Another pastor friend I remember saying once, if he felt a 50% plus nudge from the Lord, he would always err on the side of going rather than on the side of possibly disobeying the Lord. So putting that out there, if you feel that nudge to go, just go and know, like Summer said, that you can make an impact. You and the Lord are a majority, and you never know who else you may influence. It might be the lawmaker's assistant, it might be the person you meet in the street, but just go where you feel the Lord directing you to go. Within that, make sure you do your homework. This may seem somewhat obvious, but even within your own heart and mind, think about what are you hoping to achieve. If your lawmaker's on side, it might just be bringing an issue to their attention. If they're not on side, it'll be quite challenging to convince them to go over to your side. But just have that prayer time, have that conversation with the Lord. What are we trying to do here? Or is it a general issue, a partisan issue? Also, within your homework, make sure you research your lawmaker. What's their career background? Do they have a family? Knowing those things is going to help you tailor your message as well to your audience. Also, make sure you know how much time you have. When I was a lawmaker, I was scheduled in 15-minute meeting increments. And so you want to make sure you utilize that 15 minutes to the absolute best of your ability, knowing the issue inside and out, anticipating questions. And if you've not done a lot of lobbying, and we don't like the word lobbying, but effectively you're going to try and influence someone's mind. If you've not done a lot of it, present it to a friend, a family, tell them what you plan to say, and ask them, what questions do you have for me? And try and that way anticipate some of the questions that might come up. This next piece may seem really obvious, but your demeanor and how you approach this is so vital. You want to be likable, calm, nice. I'm from Minnesota, so we have this, phrase called Minnesota nice, which is just trying in every situation to be respectful, defer, and make sure you show an actual interest in them, the person you're meeting as a person. We want to have the same attitude as Christ, and he was the most humble person ever. So we want to make sure we approach all things in that way. And you really will. It's incredibly effective. I promise you. And I share that actually. I should share a bit of a story why. I had failed to properly prepare some testifiers that were coming to help me out on a bill. We were talking about aborted fetal tissue. And just go back here. I don't know if I can go back. I'll go back. There we go. So they had amazing information. They were wonderful Christian ladies, but they hadn't, I don't know if they'd been in committee meetings before where there can often be very high tensions. And they were being questioned by a Democrat lawmaker who got a bit antagonistic, and they ended up sort of responding in kind. And so I had to, in the middle of the meeting, kind of pull them aside and explain decorum and things like that, which is not their fault. It was my fault for not preparing them, because we're all human. And in the heat of a moment, it's hard to know how you're going to respond, but you can mitigate that response by anticipating that passions might arise and resolving ahead of time to be calm in the midst of that. So that's my key tip. There. When you're in the meeting, be sure you thank profusely the lawmaker who took the time to meet with you. It does go a long way because they're very busy people. Ask them questions, put that research you've already done to good use. So tailor your questions to their background, to their family, etc. And then you can segue into what are their political passions. That will help you get to the root of why you came, the specific issue you want to talk about. If you have personal stories, I'd highly encourage you to share those personal stories. Make it really compelling if you don't have your own personal stories, use other stories, and then share the facts. Going on, again, this goes back to, Laurel, I love what you said about the toddler and husband at dinner. You're going to tailor your message and what you say differently for different people. If your official's on side, either you find that out in the meeting or you know that ahead of time, you're going to want to ask what they need to get the issue over the line. You come prepared with some ideas. I can give you a few, talking to other lawmakers who are on the fence, ask them who are the people we need to target. You can also offer to host an event for them to get the issue over the line and help them out if you haven't previously. Because if this person is on your side, you want them to stay in office. So you see the person door knocking there. That's my little pitch to any of my local state lawmakers that are still in office. They can always use some help door knocking. If this person is not on side, your lawmakers, you knew that with research or you found out in the meeting. I love William Wilberforce's 8 tips of persuasion, his devices, the way he debated. I used these when I was preparing for one of my debates when I was serving in office. And I'm just going to highlight a couple. But the first one, disarming your audience. We all know that Wilberforce was key in ending the slave trade in Britain. When he spoke on this, he did not try to make people feel guilty, but rather he took the guilt and shame upon himself. He said, I'm guilty just as much as you are. We've all been apathetic, and so using that reason, avoiding guilt, and specific things within the arguments themselves. So he would pick a proposition of his opponents and then basically show why it was groundless. This is point number 6. So for example, on aborted fetal tissue, the people that support that often say, oh, it saves lives, which is hard to argue with. How can you argue with saving lives? But the reality is research on aborted fetal tissue has saved absolutely 0 lives. And so that's a groundless argument. And you can get hopefully persuade some people at least that's, start the wheel in their head turning to think maybe what I've thought about this isn't quite accurate or right. And then the last thing you want to do there is give some inspiration for you to avoid guilty inaction. When you actually get to the ask, what you're going to be asking, make sure it's very specific, because lawmakers have hundreds and hundreds of bills presented to them on a monthly basis. So you want them to vote for a bill. You want them to vote against a bill. Do you want them to introduce a bill, sponsor specific legislation?